strongest woman in the room isn't always the healthiest. Sometimes she's just the one who's learned she has to carry everything alone. Welcome back to the Soft but Savage Method, Conversations in Becoming, where every week we have honest conversations about rebuilding self-trust, creating emotional stability, and becoming the woman you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Mickey Garcia, and this is episode 11. Today I want to talk about something that we hear women say all the time. I'm the strong one. Sometimes they say it with pride. Sometimes they say it with exhaustion. And sometimes they don't even realize how much that identity has cost them. Maybe you're the one everyone calls during a crisis. You're the dependable one, the steady one, responsible, capable. You keep going when life gets hard. You figure things out and you take care of everyone else. And somewhere along the way, you became so good at carrying everything that people stopped asking whether you needed someone to carry you. So the truth is, being strong isn't a problem. The problem is believing that you always have to be. Because eventually, the woman who never lets herself need anything eventually starts believing that she really doesn't need anything. And she doesn't deserve to need anything. So today, we're going to explore the hidden cost of always being the strong one and what real strength actually looks like. So the first thing I want to talk about is that strength can actually start to become your identity instead of just a choice. For a lot of us, being the strong one didn't start out as a personality trait. It started as survival. Maybe you grew up in a home where someone had to be responsible. Maybe your emotions didn't feel safe. And maybe other people depended on you long before you were ready. So you adapted. You became capable. You became reliable. You became independent. And back then, those qualities helped you. They helped you survive. When I left my marriage, I had people tell me how strong I was for making that choice. And I understand why. I'd walked away from this life that I'd been living for close to 22 years. I was completely starting over. And there were a lot of things that I suddenly had to figure out. From the outside, I'm sure it looked like strength. But I don't always remember feeling particularly strong. Sometimes it was a more of, what else am I going to do? It's got to be done, right? So there were things that had to be handled, decisions that had to be made, problems that had to be solved. And if I was scared or overwhelmed or didn't know how I was going to handle it, it didn't really matter. Those things still needed to be handled, right? So sometimes I think that we misunderstand when we look at women who look strong. Because there are times when she's not standing there thinking, whew, look at me, I can do anything. Sometimes she's just thinking, there's nobody else here to catch me, so I've got to figure it out. And if you live that way long enough, you get really good at figuring things out. And those aren't bad things. I don't want you to think that, I got really good at figuring out things that I never thought I would have to figure out. Figuring out things that terrified me. But also there's another side to that. Somewhere throughout that process, I can do this became I have to do this. And then I have to do this became I shouldn't need anyone else to help me do this. And that's where our strength stops being something that we have and starts being something that we have to perform. And I think that's the distinction that I've had to learn. So being capable of carrying something does not mean that I always have to carry it alone. So our first becoming moment then is this. Being the strong one isn't exhausting because you're capable. It's exhausting because you've forgotten that you're allowed to put the weight down. So carrying everything yourself, it doesn't just make life harder, right? It changes the way that you experience relationships. So the next point that I want to make is that when you have strength without vulnerability, that can create a lot of loneliness. One of the hidden costs of always being that strong person, that strong woman, is that people begin believing that you really don't need anything. Sometimes it's because you've convinced them. Sometimes it's because you've convinced yourself. So you become the helper, the fixer, the dependable one, the listener. And while everyone else then feels supported, you start to feel unseen. Not because people don't love you, of course they love you. You've just become so good at hiding your needs that people forget that you have them. And real connection requires being known. But we can't be fully known if we're only showing people our strengths. So one of the hardest things to admit is that sometimes people stop checking on us because we've taught them that they don't need to. And that sounds kind of harsh, I get it. And I'm certainly not trying to place blame. I am guilty of this myself. Think about someone else in your life who always answers, "I'm fine." So the first few times, you might ask again, "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." Well, pretty soon you stop asking because you believe what they're telling you. So many of us we've gotten so good at looking like we're okay that the people around us really can't tell when we're not. And then something really painful happens. We kind of start believing that nobody notices us, right? Nobody cares about us. Nobody checks on us. Nobody asks how we're really doing. But maybe they're really just responding to that version of us that we have continually shown them. We've shown them over and over and over that we're fine, right? We're okay. We don't need any help. We can do it. And that doesn't mean they don't love us. That just means we're really convincing. So, growing up, my mom and dad divorced when I was about 13. I have 3 younger sisters. So, it really was my mom and the 4 of us girls. And my mom worked 2 jobs to support us all. And she had learned at some point in her life not to ask for help. And so, of course, that got passed to us. So, on the one hand, we figured out we could do things that we never would have thought we could do, right? I mean, if we needed something heavy carried or something, like a mattress carried up the stairs, we figured out how to do it. If there was nobody around, we didn't ask anybody, we just figured it out. So on the one hand, that was great. But on the other hand, she had learned probably very early on, and I know in some of her relationships, that asking for help wasn't safe. And that didn't mean that the people in her life or the people in our lives don't love us. But she was really good at saying, you know what, if you're not going to help me, that's fine, I'll figure it out. And she did. But that wasn't good for her, and it wasn't good for us. So let me ask you something. So when was the last time somebody asked you how you were doing and you answered honestly, really, truly honestly? Not, oh, I'm fine. Not, I'm good. But really, honestly. Because real connection requires two things: someone willing to ask and someone willing to answer. So our second becoming moment of this episode is this: people can't support the needs you never allow them to see. So good relationships, those really strong relationships, they aren't built because one person never struggles. We're not all just amazing and perfect and Wonder Woman every single day, right? Sometimes we feel like we need to be, but that's part of the problem. But those really strong relationships, they're built because we allow both people to be human, to have issues, to have struggles. It's okay. Which brings me then to one of the biggest misunderstandings of all. Real strength includes receiving. A lot of women, in part because of the way we were raised, in part because of the way society is, but we kind of have this idea, this belief that asking for and accepting help makes us weak. But think about the people in your life that you love. When they're struggling, do you think less of them because they need help? Probably not. Most of us would say absolutely not, right? You're glad that they trust you when they need help and that they come to you. So why then do we think we need to apply a different standard to ourselves? It's crazy. Real strength is not proving that you can carry everything. Real strength means knowing what belongs to you and what doesn't. It's asking for support before you reach that point of complete exhaustion. It's resting without earning it. It's just allowing someone else to show up for you. Because our strength is not measured by how much we carry. It's measured by how we live. So if that's true, then why do we feel so darn uncomfortable? For some women and certain situations, it's guilt. We feel guilty asking for help or accepting help because we feel like we should be able to handle it on our own. We should be able to take care of it ourselves. For others, it's fear, and I think that might be a little bit of what was happening with my mom. You know, that fear is, what if I need someone and they aren't there when I need them? And for others, then it's independence. You've carried everything alone for so long that help actually kind of feels more uncomfortable than just doing it by yourself. And then there's this one. I don't want to be a burden. Oh my goodness. I want to challenge that one, right? So think about somebody that you love, a close friend, one of your children, a parent, a sibling. If they called you and said, I really need your help, would your first thought be, oh my God, what a burden? Probably not. I would hope not. You're probably happy that they felt safe enough with you and comfortable enough with you to ask. So then why do we think that everyone else experiences us differently? What if receiving isn't taking something from somebody? What if it's just another way of allowing them to show us their love? So that's a very different way of thinking about things. So moving is probably one example for myself that's very big. Divorced, I've moved twice since then, and I didn't want to ask anybody for help. I couldn't afford to hire movers, but I didn't want to be a burden to my friends or my kids. So I moved everything I could alone. I carried boxes I had no business carrying, especially at my age. I packed everything, I organized everything. I made 100 trips back and forth to my car and from my house to my apartment, from my apartment to my sister's. All those things. I got things in the back of my car that I don't know how I got them in there, let alone got them back out. And if somebody said, "Hey, do you need some help?" I automatically said no, without even thinking. No, I've got it, it's fine. When it was very clear that I did not have it. So I was exhausted. My back hurt, my legs hurt, my feet hurt. I fell down the stairs more than once. I was sweating, I was swearing. It was not pretty. And still, I'm telling people, nope, I'm good, I've got it, go away. How ridiculous is that? If one of my kids called me tomorrow and said, "Hey Mom, I have to move, can you help?" Of course I would help. I would do whatever I could. Pack, carry boxes, organize the car, whatever. And I wouldn't think that they were weak. I wouldn't think that they were a burden. I wouldn't think, "Why are you asking me?" I would never think that. I would just think, "Hey, you're my kids, you're my family. Of course I'm gonna help. What time do you need me?" Now, to be fair, the last time I moved, my kids did help me. I did ask them because there was just literally no way that I could do it. There's no way I could carry a sofa down 2 flights of stairs out of my apartment, fit it in the back of my little car, and move it to my storage unit. But I hated it. I felt like, particularly in a situation where you're asking your children, I felt like I'm the mom. I should not be asking my grown children to help me because I should be able to figure it out, which is just so silly. Of course they helped. They were amazing. We got everything done. But for some reason, I've spent so much of my life thinking that those same rules that I'll apply to the rest of my family or my friends about help don't apply to me. I shouldn't need help, especially from my kids, right? And I think that is what being the strong one can do to us. We've gotten so used to being the person who shows up that we forget that we're allowed to be the person that someone shows up for. Sometimes we don't even give people the opportunity. We say, "Nope, I've got it," before they've even finished asking. Not because we really have it, but because accepting that help feels way more uncomfortable than just struggling on our own. And that's something I've really had to start noticing in myself and that I've really tried to work on. So imagine wearing a heavy backpack every single day. At first, you notice the weight. Oh my gosh, it's just so much. Eventually, the longer you wear it, you kind of stop noticing it. It just becomes normal. Not because it became any lighter, right? You're just used to that extra weight. Then one day, somebody reaches over and says, "Here, let me help you with that." And before they have a chance to take that backpack, you say, "Nope, I've got it. I'm good." Not because it's light, because you've forgotten what it feels like to walk around without it. And sometimes, then, that is what being the strong one becomes. It's not strength, it's just habit. And habits can change. So, our final becoming moment of this episode is this. Strength isn't measured by how much you carry. It's measured by how honestly you're willing to live. So maybe this week the invitation is not to become stronger. Maybe it's just to become more honest about what you've been carrying alone. Our reflection questions for this week are these. Where have I confused being needed with being valuable? And what am I carrying that I no longer have to carry by myself? Really give yourself some time this week to ponder these questions. So if today's conversation resonated with you, if you are realizing that being the strong one has become more exhausting than empowering, you don't have to figure out how to change that all alone. That is exactly the kind of work that we do together in coaching. Together, we'll explore the patterns that you've carried for years, rebuild self-trust, and create new ways of living that don't require you to abandon yourself for everyone else. If you're ready for that kind of support, I would love to walk alongside you. You can learn more about my coaching and all of my resources on my website. The link is below in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. And remember, strength was never meant to mean that you have to carry everything all alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to put something down. Until next time, keep becoming.